Okay, guys, so after a couple of my last videos about this, everyone told me that I need to look more into the elite specializations to really understand what they are, so let's do that. Let's watch this video.
What profession or class should you play in Guild Wars 2? In this video, I'll cover every class or profession as we call it in Guild Wars 2, and next to that, I'll also cover all of the elite specializations for each profession, even the new ones that came with the End of Dragons expansion. You can unlock elite specializations as soon as you reach level 80 and have one of the expansions. These elite specializations are enhancements that add a new mechanic.
So I've heard that up to the End of Dragons that all the elite specializations came by expansion, right? Like there was only one for each class eventually, or originally, and then, or not originally, but in Path of Thorns, and then Heart of Fire there was another one, and then End of Dragons there was the third one. That's all I know really about them, except for just the basics of what they are.
To your current profession. It also allows your profession to wield new weapons in combat and use new abilities. You can only have one elite specialization active at a time, but don't worry too much about those just yet. Just see what profession fits your playstyle. You might have seen my last video about classes and professions, however that one got outdated, so here's a new one for you, totally updated for the years to come. I'll cover each profession and their respective elite specializations in about 3 to 4 minutes. So just the basics, enough to get you going. I won't cover builds because builds change and profession mechanics don't. If you're totally new to Guild Wars 2, let's start with the difficulty of each profession and their elite.
This is the really difficult thing about Guild Wars 2 for me currently, is that I really still don't understand what these things actually do, but it's also kind of hard to find a video just talking about the elite specializations specifically. People always sort of roll them into one big class ball, and I kind of understand the classes to a degree already, but the elite specializations are the things that I'm really interested in learning
Specializations.
about.
Take this with a grain of salt. It's a subjective list. It's based on my experience of playing Guild Wars 2 for the last 10 years. So if I tell you that a thief is a harder profession, don't let that discourage you from playing a thief.
Totally.
But if you want to play an easy profession to start with, this is a segment for you. You can skip this segment by using the timestamps in the video description. This video took a while to make, so I'd appreciate it if you drop a like, a sub, or share this video with
let's go ahead and drop that like. This is a thing that I think is really important to sort of note, is that the easier professions are not the ones that you should necessarily play if you think that you're not good or whatever. But there are times in my time playing other video games where I specifically look for what the easiest classes or professions or whatever actually are, because sometimes it's just nice to chill out and play something that doesn't have as many buttons or as much thinking about it. I'm really, really interested in playing Elementalist, specifically the one that summons all of the weapons and everything, because I think that sounds really, really cool. But that's something that I'm going to do after I get through my Necromancer and do all of the things with that, get him to max level, go through some expansions, do some stuff with that, because I want to learn the game a little bit more before I actually get into it.
your guildies if you like it. It's me, Keo, and let's get into it. Alright, profession difficulty. I made some changes since my last video. I still consider the Warrior, Ranger, Guardian, and Necromancer the easier professions. These are great professions to start playing Guild Wars 2 with. This is simply because these professions have some form of sustain that makes it easier to survive. For example, the Ranger's pet or the Necromancer's minions can help you in combat and make it easier for you when you're leveling. I made a change in the intermediate professions, however. I consider the Revenant and the Mesmer as professions with an intermediate difficulty. The Revenant and the Mesmer are definitely professions you can start the game with, but might require a bit of time to get used to. I moved the Engineer to the harder professions. Along with the Thief and the Elementalist, I consider the Engineer a harder profession. Also, the great number of skills these professions have access to make them somewhat harder to learn and to master.
I would say out of all of these classes, the only one that is not interesting to me at this point, and I don't mean that they're not interesting as in they're not cool, they're just not a class that I actively really want to try out right now. There's two of them actually, are the Mesmer and the Engineer. The Mechanist Engineer spec looks kind of cool to a degree, but there's a lot of things about Engineer that sort of put me off of it, and Mesmer just doesn't seem like it fits my aesthetic desires for a class or anything, which is, you know, kind of a flimsy reason to not play it. And a lot of times things like that I feel as a gut instinct whenever I'm thinking about my class choice, a lot of times they're counter to what I actually end up enjoying playing. I never thought that I would play a Warlock in WoW because I thought that standing still and casting sounded really boring to me, and Warlock is now my favorite class. But besides that, basically every single one of these specs are somewhat interesting to me, or at least have one elite spec that I'm interested in playing. The bow user in Champion, the big archer, that one looks really interesting to me. As I said, I want to play the Elementalist that summons all the weapons. We'll learn about these more in a little bit. And then a Staff Thief sounds really cool too. Thief looks really interesting in general. I know that they're really difficult to pick up and learn, but the way they move around and the damage that they do and the way that they fight looks really fun.
Over all the difficulties of all the elite
I know a lot of people
specializations,
love
but
Thief.
I put them in a chart or table to indicate how difficult they are. Once again, take this with a grain of salt. It's purely...
Let's see. Guardian, which one was it? The Dragon Hunter. Maybe that was the one that I was thinking of using. And then the Elementalist. Well, I can't see it because of the...
subjective. Alright, let's look at our first profession, the warrior. You are probably familiar with the warrior class or profession from other games.
turn the
The
closed
warrior in
captions
Guild
off.
Wars 2 is a heavy armored profession that is melee focused on dealing melee damage. Adrenaline is the warrior's unique profession mechanic. Whenever a warrior attacks, you build up adrenaline. You can see this adrenaline build up above your skill bar. With this adrenaline, you can unleash a powerful burst attack with the weapon you are currently using.
Ooh,
the more
okay.
adrenaline you have, the more powerful the burst attack will be. The warrior's skills boost their performance in combat. Warriors can also drop banners that increase the damage or health of your allies. This is really helpful whenever you are playing with others. The
Warrior has this sort of element to it that I like in a warrior class where it wants you to stay in combat. The more you can stay in combat, the more you can stay fighting, the quicker you earn your resource, and then you can spend that resource quicker, and I think that's always a really good feeling. If there's a barbarian class in a game, to me, a barbarian is denoted by the fact that it is better to be in combat than it is to be out of combat with that class.
The warrior has a naturally high health pool and has a high defense due to their heavy armor. This makes it easier for a warrior to survive in combat. If you have the Heart of Thorns
Warrior's so
expansion,
dope,
a
dude.
warrior can unlock the Berserker Elite Specialization. This elite specialization allows for a reckless high damage approach to combat. The Berserker is able to use a new offhand weapon, the Torch. The Torch is used in combat to inflict damage over time effects to your foes. The new and unique
Alright.
profession mechanic of the Berserker is Berserk. The Berserk ability replaces the warrior's regular
Love
burst
Berserk.
attack. Once a warrior gathers enough adrenaline to go Berserk, it increases their attack speed and damage. While in Berserk, the warrior's
Sort of like
adrenaline
Fury,
builds
but
up
a decent
much
amount
faster,
different.
and when the adrenaline bar is full, the warrior can use a primal burst attack. With the Path of Fire expansion, the warrior unlocks the Spellbreaker Elite Specialization. This elite specialization gives the warrior more abilities to protect and play more defensively.
This is not
The
my warrior
Spellbreaker is
fantasy,
able
personally.
to use a dagger in either hand. This allows for a more fast-paced, melee-focused approach to combat. Once you use the Spellbreaker Elite Specialization,
My warrior fantasy is Guts from Berserk. Big, huge swords, sling through everything, and do these crazy big spinning attacks that just sweep across the battlefield. That's my warrior fantasy, personally. Big, huge guy with big, huge sword.
it gains the Full Counter ability. The Full Counter ability lets you block incoming attacks. Whenever an enemy strikes you while you're channeling Full Counter, the attack will retaliate against them. The End of Dragons expansion lets the warrior unlock the Bladesworn Elite Specialization. This elite specialization lets the warrior perform stronger burst attacks at the cost of speed. The Bladesworn lets you use an offhand pistol. This pistol allows for fast attacks in between your regular attacks. The Bladesworn Elite Specialization also replaces the warrior's adrenaline for flow and gives access to the gun saber. Whenever a Bladesworn enters combat, it will generate flow. Once a warrior gains more flow, it can be used to activate the dragon trigger.
It's sort of difficult to really confidently understand what he's talking about with all of these things, because there's a thing that's happening in my brain while I'm watching this, and some of you in the comments below might be able to help me out with this. They're not super tied to the weapons that you unlock with them. You use those weapons, but there's none of these that are big sword warrior as far as he's talked about so far. Both of them use dual wielding or use daggers or use the gun blade. None of those are big sword, but there is big sword warrior for sure because there's skills associated with it. But I'm assuming that goes more into builds, and this is more about the secondary mechanic or the driving mechanic for your class that you're actually using. So this bar and what this bar does and what the special traits of your class actually are. And then the weapon skills are their own thing that goes cooperatively with it. Dude, the Guild Wars 2 stuff makes my brain hurt trying to hold it all in. It's one of those games that I'm normally a play by feel kind of person, and this game makes my head hurt whenever I try to learn about it, but I feel like I have to because there's so much that I can't possibly experience what the feel is of everything to figure out what it is that I like the most personally. It takes so long to get good with anything.
The Dragon Trigger converts flow into charges, and these are used to perform a slow but devastating attack. And next to that, the Blade Sword can activate the Gun Saber, which gives the warrior 5 extra skills for great AoE damage. That's the warrior and its elite specializations in a nutshell.
Warrior
Got a question?
wild,
drop
dude.
a comment. I always answer them. Let's move on to the Guardian
always answer the
profession. The
comments, you
Guardian is another
psychopath.
heavy armored profession that uses
How many comments do you have? Oh my gosh, does he? Oh my gosh, he does. Nutso, dude. Nutso. Good for you,
holy
man.
and light skills to damage foes or heal allies. You can compare a Guardian to Paladin-like classes in other games.
Totally.
The Guardian's unique profession mechanics are virtues. Virtues give a Guardian passive bonuses over time, but Guardians can also activate their virtues for an instant effect. The first virtue, Virtue of Justice, burns foes every few attacks. Activate this virtue to inflict burning on your next attack. The second virtue, Virtue
like
of
Diablo's
Resolve,
Paladin.
passively regenerates your health. You can activate it to heal yourself and allies instantly. Your third and last virtue, Virtue of Courage, gives
at
you
a
an
time.
Aegis periodically that blocks incoming attacks. Activate the virtue to instantly grant Aegis to you and your allies. Activating the virtues puts them on a cooldown. When this happens, you can't benefit from the virtue's passive effects as long as they are on cooldown. Guardians can do a lot of damage, while they also have a lot of skills to protect themselves and allies with. Therefore, the Guardian is a great profession to start playing Guild Wars 2 with. Whenever a Guardian unlocks an elite specialization, their virtue's active effects change, but their passive effects remain the same. If you have the Heart of Thorns expansion, the Guardian can unlock the Dragon Hunter elite specialization. This elite specialization allows for a more stationary bait and lure type of approach for the Guardian. The Dragon Hunter can use a longbow in combat. This allows for a more long-range playstyle for the melee-focused Guardian. The Guardian's virtues also change when using Dragon Hunter elite specialization. Your first virtue now hurls a burning spear at your foe. This tethers you to your foe and
So, does anyone just use the regular base specialization at all? If everything changes your mechanics at elite specialization, does it basically just completely circumvent the original way that you're playing the game? That's a little confusing to me as far as because it feels like you're learning a character and then you get to end game and then all of a sudden your character's different. Maybe there's another one, but if these were released individually through expansions, then it's nutso that you played Guardian and then you got to end game, you got the next expansion, and then you just had to start using a bow. That seems crazy, so people must use the base specialization too. So it's really like everybody has 4. I'm going to keep listening. We'll find
and they
out.
receive negative effects periodically, and it can also be used as a crowd control ability. Your second virtue now lets you leap to the target area. On impact, you heal allies in the area. Your third virtue still
not using
grants
a bow
Aegis,
here,
but
see?
also blocks incoming attacks in front of you. However, you are still vulnerable from the sides and from behind. With the Path of Fire expansion, the Guardian can unlock the Firebrand elite special.
Once again, I keep getting confused by the fact that the Dragon Hunter is a class that uses a bow. It's a specialization that uses a bow, but you can also use other weapons to go along with it. So the Guardian still retains the Guardian. It just unlocks capabilities to use other weapons with it and has the Guardian twist on those weapons. It's a lot to take in.
Specialization. This elite specialization is great if you want to support your allies but also want to damage your foes. The Firebrand can also use an axe in combat, and its virtues
It's like Aura
active effects
Paladin in,
have changed
Diablo.
once more. The axe allows the Firebrand to play more stationary and supportive. But don't let that fool you, the axe has great damage over time effects too. Your virtues now open a tome of lore that gives the Firebrand access to new skills. Your first virtue now opens a tome
really
that grants
flashy.
you new skills to damage your foes. The second virtue opens a tome that grants skills to heal you and your allies. The third virtue now opens a tome to protect allies and provide them with boons. The Firebrand is also able to use mantras to heal and support allies or damage foes. These mantras can be used instantly and multiple times before they go on cooldown. The End of Dragons expansion.
This is the thing that's so funny about Guild Wars 2 that people who come from other MMOs don't completely understand. We have, in other MMOs, you think of interrupts, damage skills, healing skills, you have crowd control, you have DOTs, you have these kinds of things. And then in Guild Wars 2, it goes, oh, you have all of those things, but they're also split up into these other subcategories that change based on what character you're playing, and they sort of interact with the world in these kinds of different ways. It's such what's the term here? There's so much micro customization going on inside of Guild Wars. There's a lot of macro customization in most MMOs. There's a lot of, big changes that you can make to your character. This spec does mainly DOT. This spec is a single target DPS. This spec is a tank. This spec is a healer. This spec is an AoE DPS. This spec is a short range DPS. In this game, it's, this spec has elements of all of those things, and the way that you have to juggle them and the movement that you use to get around the map is going to be completely different based on, or the battlefield is going to be completely different based on how you decide to play, what weapons you throw in here. There's so many little things that everything can kind of be everything, and as someone like me who comes from these other games where even in something like Elder Scrolls Online, you are still falling into, am I ranged DPS? Am I melee DPS? Am I healer or am I tank? Those are the things that you're thinking about. This game circumvents so much of that, and it's everything is kind of DPS, and then it's really about how you run your character that depends on whether or not you are adding to healing that is going on in the group, or you are tanking more of the damage, or all of those, what your survivability is, all of these little kinds of things. It becomes this such a crowd effort in the larger scale things, it feels like. I have not heard a single person so far call themselves a healer in Guild Wars 2, and that could just be because I haven't been asking the right questions, but it is something to note, because when you ask people what they play in World of Warcraft, they tell you that they're a healer, they tell you that they're a tank, they tell you that they are a DPS, and they tell you their class. In this game, they tell you their character's backstory. It's such a different kind of world, dude. It's really good. It's
just
the Guardian difficult to wrap your head around.
Elite specialization. This elite specialization turns the slow,
every now and then I have to dump because
into a fast-moving, self-centered
so much
soldier.
going in.
The Willbender can now use a sword in their offhand. Their new sword skills allow for more fast-paced attacks and more mobility. The Willbender's flames replace your virtue's active effects and leave a trail of flames.
Samurai?
Your first virtue now lets you dash towards an enemy, which leaves a trail of damaging flames. Your second virtue now lets you dash in your preferred direction and leaves a trail of damaging flames that can also heal you. Your third virtue lets you shadow step a short distance and leaves a circle of damaging flames. Once you land, you gain a short effect that grants you boons whenever you strike foes. That's the Guardian for you, and let's get going with the Revenant.
color scheme of the Guardian,
The
but the
Revenant
skills are
is
awesome.
the only
This one I'm
profession in Guild Wars
interested in.
2 that requires an expansion to play. In order to play it, you either need the Heart of Thorns, Path of Fire, or End of Dragons expansion. The Revenant is yet another heavy armored profession. The Revenant is a profession that uses the powers of the mists to deal damage to foes or support their allies. In order to do so, Revenants channel legends of the past that all have their own set of skills. Some legends are better at dealing damage, while others are great at supporting your allies. A Revenant can commune with two legends, but can only channel one at the same time. This means that you can have two legends in combat, and you can switch back and forth between those two legends.
The movement in this game, I used to say that this game looked like Diablo 2 whenever I was seeing videos of it, or Diablo 3 or Diablo 4, whatever Diablo game you want to say it looks like. The more that I get into Guild Wars 2, the more the movement and the combat reminds me a lot of a MOBA in some kinds of ways. The buttons are far fewer, but the overall kit that you have and the tool chest that you have with each individual character is very varied and nuanced in its own really special kind of way. It just, the movement, that dash behind them and then the spin attack that he did looks so much like League of Legends to me.
Legends. A Revenant uses energy to channel the powers of these legends. This energy is displayed above your skill bar. Once your energy runs out, you can't use your legend skills. You'll have to wait until it has regenerated, or you have to swap to your other legend. The usage of the two legends and the energy system might be less straightforward for some players, and therefore the Revenant can be a bit harder to get into if you're completely new to Guild Wars 2. But if you like it, give the Revenant a chance. If you own the Heart of Thorns expansion, the Revenant can unlock the Herald elite specialization. The Herald gives the Revenant more defensive and supportive abilities to survive and support allies. A Herald can now use a shield in combat. The shield skills are great because they can provide boons and heal allies, but it can also be used to protect yourself. The Revenant can channel with the legendary dragon Glint. Glint gives you access to facets that support your allies. Facets can only be used when channeling with Glint. Whenever a facet is activated, it pulls supportive boons to nearby allies while it drains your energy. When you activate that same facet again, you can use it to deal damage and inflict negative effects to your foes. The Path of Fire expansion lets the Revenant unlock the Renegade elite specialization. The Renegade is great at dealing damage and can provide specific boons to allies. As a Renegade, you are able to invoke the powers of the legendary char Kala Scorchrazor. Kala lets the Renegade empower allies, bomb their foes, and reduce the cooldown of your abilities and the abilities of your allies. The Renegade...
My brain is being so overwhelmed by all of this information currently. You guys are dastardly in the videos that you recommend.
It can also use a short bow in combat. This allows for mid-range combat and damage. The Renegade can summon Kala's Warband from the mists to aid you in battle. These Warband members deal damage to foes, but can also provide some boons to you and your allies. The End of Dragons expansion lets the Revenant unlock the Vindicator. The Vindicator can use a great sword in combat. This allows the Vindicator to deal great damage from up close. A Vindicator gains access to the legendary Alliance stance, which lets you channel the powers of Saint Victor and Archimorus. So the legendary Alliance stance channels two legends instead of one. Using the skills of Saint Victor lets the Vindicator be more supportive and defensive. This while the skills of Archimorus are all offensive abilities. Additionally, the Vindicator's dodge is replaced by a leap.
Nothing has a single purpose in this game. Everything serves multiple purposes, so there is so much customization within your playstyle. It almost feels like if you like... It almost feels like you could pick any class and find something that you like within it. No matter what, that any class that you're going to pick, you're going to have a good time with probably. And there might be some that as you go on, your specific play style fits them more or fits them in a more distinct way. But in general, it feels like everything is going to be liked by basically everyone. And that's what I've noticed the most in this game is that everybody sort of likes all of the classes, that there's professions, that there's not very many people who go, oh, I hate playing X1, because at a certain point, they all have capabilities to be like all of the other ones, just with different flavors on top of it.
This leap leaves you up in the air for a brief period and then lets you crash down, dealing damage on impact. That's the Revenant and all the heavy armor professions in the game. Okay, if you haven't by now, leave a like on this video and let's move on to the medium armor professions. Starting off with the Ranger. The Ranger is a medium armored profession that uses the power of nature and other survival tactics to deal damage. Of course, a Ranger can also use bows in combat along with other weapons. A Ranger can be compared to Rangers or archer-like classes from other games. The Ranger's unique profession mechanic is the Ranger's pet. Your pet aids you in combat and even has its own ability. You can have a second pet on standby and switch to another one in combat. A Ranger and their pet fight as one. This means that some of your skills benefit you and your pet. You can tame and collect more pets as you venture through the world. Each pet family has their own ability, so it's smart to use a pet that fits your current playstyle or situation. And because of this, a pet makes the Ranger a great profession to start playing Guild Wars 2 with. Your pet can deal damage, but can also...
Yeah, it can be compared to the Archer class in other MMOs, or it can use a greatsword with a bear next to it, and you can set the greatsword on fire and hurl yourself towards enemies. Dude, it is so... How do you choose? How do you choose what you want to do in this game? I'm playing Necromancer and I have class envy. I don't know what to do. All I want to do is play all the classes.
Also take damage for you. This gives you some more time to adapt to your situation. The Heart of Thorns expansion allows the Ranger to use the Druid elite specialization. This elite specialization is often used to heal and
turns into a constellation, so I've heard.
Support allies, but can also deal a good amount of damage. The Druid uses a staff to heal allies and cleanse them from any negative effects. While healing allies with a staff, a Druid gains astral force. This
So
astral
this one's
force
actually a
fills up a
healer
bar
then.
above your health bar. When this bar is full, you can enter the celestial avatar form.
Okay.
The celestial avatar form gives the druid a new array of skills to quickly and effectively heal your allies
Okay, so
with.
this one's actually a
Also,
healer.
the new glyphs that the druid gains access to change based on your current state. If you are not in the celestial avatar form, they'll deal damage to your foes.
Oh, so not
if
just
you
a
are
healer,
using
okay.
the glyphs while in celestial avatar form, they'll heal or support your allies.
Okay.
If you own the Path of Fire expansion, the ranger can unlock the Soul Beast elite specialization. This elite specialization is often used to inflict a great amount of damage to your foes. A Soul Beast is able to wield a dagger in their main hand. This allows for a fast-paced combat style, and it inflicts damage over time effects to your foes. As a Soul Beast, the
This is something, if you're watching down here, let's go back just a little bit and you can watch that again. So watch
combat
down here.
style,
You see how
and
it's
it
flicking
inflicts
back and
damage
forth
over
between other
time
things?
effect.
This is something that's really interesting about Guild Wars 2 combat that I've just learned recently that I'm going to have to start enacting into what I'm doing. So there are combos on your auto attack, and your auto attacks are skills, and your auto attacks are going to be doing things the whole time that you're not using regular skills, and you can interrupt them with your regular skills and actually decrease your uptime and decrease your damage dealt by interrupting the auto attack combos that are going on constantly. Think about this as the chains in Final Fantasy XIV. If you've ever played Final Fantasy XIV, you've played something like a Guardian where they have the skills that set up the next skill, and you can't use each skill until you've used the previous one. This is sort of like that, except you interrupt the chain on here by using one of the other skills, so then you have to make sure that this one is not being interrupted whenever you're using your skills. These aren't just better than this one. This is an actual skill that's being used as well. It's a lot, dude. It's a
to
lot.
your foes. As a Soul Beast, the Ranger is now able to merge with their pet. Once a Soul Beast merges with their pet, they'll go into Beast mode. Whenever a Soul Beast is in Beast mode, the effects of certain attributes are significantly increased. The Soul Beast will also gain a number of new skills. These skills are based on the type of pet you merge with. Also, the Soul Beast stances are great since they instantly give you a number of bonuses while in combat. The End of Dragons expansion allows the Ranger to unlock the Untamed Elite specialization. This elite specialization highly benefits from foes that are knocked down, stunned, or any other form of crowd control. An
Hammer.
Untamed can use a hammer in combat. This weapon can disable foes or deal increased damage whenever foes are disabled. This is based on whether an Untamed is unleashed or not. Whenever an Untamed unleashes, their pet and the Untamed gain a number of new abilities. Your pets will gain abilities that inflict more damage to foes whenever they are disabled, and the Untamed gains a number of new abilities to disable them with. You can either untame the Ranger or the Ranger's pet. Based on what you untamed, you gain different skills, and you can easily switch back and forth
So
between
much.
untaming the Ranger or the pet. Moving on to the Thief, the next medium armored profession on the list. As the name suggests, the Thief uses techniques to steal from foes
Thief
and uses
looks really,
tricks
really
to
cool
deal
to me.
damage to foes. A Thief can be compared to rogues or assassins in other games. The Thief
So I think that thieves actually pull buffs from stealing from the enemies, if I've got that correct.
has two profession mechanics. A thief has a steal skill, which you can use to steal items from your foes. Whenever you steal something, you gain an item that you can either consume for boons, or you can use it to deal damage. The effects of steal can be enhanced by selecting specific traits. Another unique mechanic of the Thief is initiative. The Thief is unique since it has no cooldowns on their weapon skills.
Okay.
Instead, a Thief uses initiative to perform
you
skills.
just burn
Initiative
hard.
is shown above your skill bar and replenishes every second. Since the Thief has no cooldowns and uses initiative instead, it allows them to attack in rapid succession. Thieves can also pop in and out of stealth to surprise or hide from foes. And next to that, thieves can even shadow step quickly to engage or disengage from your foes. Thieves might be a bit harder.
I feel like I have to play this game more. I just feel like that's all that's going to come down to. I feel like no amount of these videos is going to teach me how to play these elite specializations. This seems absolutely insane. I haven't even got to the elite specializations of the Thief yet. I'm so glad I'm playing Necromancer. It feels way more straightforward than all the stuff that he's talked about so far. Well, Tuesday I'll be streaming it, I guess, so... Holy cow.
To get into for new players. However, if you played roguelike classes before or really dig their playstyle, you have to give the Thief a shot. If you own the Heart of Thorns expansion, the Thief can unlock the Daredevil Elite specialization. This elite specialization can deal a great amount of damage, and it also increases the mobility of the Thief even further. As a Daredevil, the Thief is able to use a staff. You don't use the staff to deal damage from afar, instead you use it for rapid melee attacks.
Yeah, it's
as
like
a Daredevil,
like a monk
you
almost.
are able to dodge 3 times
Or
instead of the
Daredevil,
regular 2
specifically.
times. The extra dodge makes the Daredevil even more mobile than the Thief. You can attach additional effects to these dodges by selecting specific traits. For example, there are traits that increase your damage after you successfully dodge. The Daredevil is mobile, but the Thief's Path of Fire elite specialization is not. The Path of Fire expansion allows the Thief to unlock the Deadeye elite specialization. This elite specialization is stationary and deals damage from a distance.
A sniper.
The Deadeye takes the role of a sniper and can still deceive foes or reposition.
Bro, they're on a roof. What other MMO do you play that has the character on a roof shooting enemies from afar with a sniper rifle? What other MMO do you play that's like that? Except for one of the ones that has the word gun in the name. What have I gotten myself into? How long is it going to take me to... Do any of you guys have this game mastered? Is there anyone who can confidently say that they have it all figured out and they know how to play this game completely all the way through? In RuneScape, that's a very typical thing, that you will find people who just tell you that you're a noob and they know everything about this game and you're an idiot for not knowing everything about this game. I've not encountered that yet. I've seen people with 14,000 hours who say, oh, and I only know a couple of classes.
Themselves. The Deadeye can use a rifle in combat. When using a rifle, a Deadeye can walk around freely and shoot foes on the go. However, you can choose to kneel down, which gives you a number of new skills, which increases your ranged damage. As a Deadeye, your steal skill is replaced by Deadeye's Mark. Deadeye's Mark
awesome
is used
too,
on
bro.
foes to generate malice. Malice is shown above your health bar and increases the damage of your stealth attacks. The more malice you have, the more powerful your stealth attacks will be. The End of Dragons expansion changes the role of the Thief a little bit. If you own the End of Dragons expansion, a Thief is able to unlock the Spectre elite specialization.
Of course they do.
This elite specialization can deal a good amount of damage to foes, but can also support allies. That's something a Thief could not do before. A Spectre is able to use a Scepter in combat. The Spectre's Scepter skills have two...
So do you choose, when you're going into a world boss or a raid or a strike or any of these things, do you and your friends plot out ahead of time what you're going to do, or is it sort of a feel thing? Do you guys know how much healing that you actually need? Do you have to respec during the fights and sort of change around your build a little bit in order to meet the requirements to get through it? Does it work like that? The dodges make it a little bit of an iffy thing as well, because there's less need for healing in this game overall, because you can actually dodge some of the big attacks. I'm sorry, this is a lot.
They can deal damage to your foes or heal and support allies. You choose. Your steal skill also has been replaced by Siphon. Siphon can be used on foes or allies. You can steal from foes to gain Shadow Force, but you can also use it on allies to give them a barrier and protect them from harm.
Okay.
When you use it on an ally, you also tether them to you. This creates a link between you and them, which you can benefit from in Shadow Shroud. The Spectre's Shadow Shroud is fueled by Shadow Force, which is gained by using your skills. It works similarly to the Necromancer's Death Shroud, which we'll discuss later in the video. The Shadow Shroud is a form that gives you a number of new skills, and these new skills grant boons to allies whenever you attack an enemy. The last medium profession on this list is the Engineer. The Engineer can be compared to classes that use technology in other games. For example, they use bombs, a flamethrower, grenades, pistols, turrets, and more. The unique profession mechanic of the Engineer is the toolbar. The toolbar is displayed above your weapon skills and contains a number of extra skills. These skills change based on your selected weapon kit. For example, I can select a flamethrower as a utility skill, and I would then gain a tool belt skill that inflicts burning without the use of a flamethrower. The weapon kits and the toolbar skills offer a wide variety of offensive and defensive abilities. This gives the Engineer countless opportunities to play their class. However, this can be overwhelming to new players who just started playing Guild Wars 2, but don't let that stop you from playing the Engineer. The Heart of Thorns expansion lets the engineer unlock the Scrapper elite specialization. This elite specialization is great at dealing damage, but can also support your allies. The Scrapper is able to wield a hammer in combat. The hammer gives the engineer some defensive abilities, but it also has a powerful stun. The unique profession mechanic of the Scrapper are its gyros. The Scrapper's gyros can be chosen and summoned through your utility skills. Most of these gyros give beneficial effects to you and your allies. You can use a gyro's utility skill for an effect, but you can also trigger its toolbar skill for another effect. The Path of Fire expansion lets the engineer unlock the Hollow Smith elite specialization. This elite specialization is great at dealing damage and
You don't even know what people are unless you know what the collars of their attacks are and what their skills look like. You can't judge. You can tell what a paladin is in World of Warcraft. You can tell when someone's running around using their skills that they're a paladin. You can tell when someone's running around using their spells as a priest that they're a priest. In this game, everything is everything, and you just go, what is that? And like I said, the class envy is so strong. You think that there's only, what is it? Is there 9 classes at the beginning? But they all have 3 specializations, so it's like there's 27 plus the original ones. It's like there's 36. There's 36 classes in this game. We're approaching Maple Story numbers with this.
Unlocks a new form for the engineer. The Photon Forge is the Holosmith's special form that grants a new set of skills. When you use skills in the Photon Forge, you generate heat. If your heat reaches the maximum, your Photon Forge overheats and you cannot use it for a brief period. The Holosmith is also able to wield a sword in combat. The sword's abilities become more effective the more heat you have generated. Also, your new Exceed skills benefit from this heat. So, the more heat you have accumulated, the more effective your skills become. The End of Dragons expansion lets the engineer unlock the Mechanist elite specialization. This elite specialization summons a Jade Mech that is good at dealing damage but can also support your allies. The Mechanist is able to use a mace in combat. A mace is used to damage or stun foes, but the mace can also support allies in combat with boons when you successfully land a few hits. The Jade Mech replaces the toolbar skills with mech commands. These commands instruct your Jade Mech to perform certain actions. The commands change based on the traits you have selected. Some traits give the Jade Mech damaging abilities and others give supportive abilities instead. The signets the Mechanist gains access to passively increase the effectiveness of the Mechanist and the Jade Mech. The Mechanist can activate the signets for an instant effect, but this puts their passive bonuses on a cooldown. If you liked the video so far, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel.
This guy is really about the
Let's
likes,
move
by
to
the
the
way.
light armored professions.
Good for him.
The first light
Grind
armored
those numbers,
profession is the
dude.
Necromancer. The Necromancer is a spellcaster that uses dark and blood magic. Necromancers can steal or corrupt boons and turn them into negative effects. Necromancers in Guild Wars 2 can be compared to warlocks or summoners in other games. The unique profession mechanic of
This is
the
what I'm playing
Necromancer is the
currently.
Death Shroud. Whenever something dies near the Necromancer or they use specific skills, a Necromancer gains life force. This life force is used to fuel the Death Shroud. You can find your accumulated
Basically a
life
second health
force
bar.
above your skill bar. When you enter the Death Shroud, you gain a number of new skills to deal damage to your foes with the life force you've collected. The Death Shroud will also provide you with an extra health bar based on the life force they've collected.
Man, and the way that I'm set up currently, whenever I'm in Death Shroud, I can heal myself. So you're sort of spending one resource down. It's like you're always flirting with death as a Necromancer, at least the way that I'm playing it currently, because I spend my health down and down and down being in the thick of combat, and then I'll switch to my other character, I'll switch to Death Shroud, and then I'll build up back up while draining my Death Shroud, and then start the cycle over again. Whenever I pop out of Death Shroud, because I use Axe, I always try to be on Axe so that I can immediately regenerate my Death Shroud and then just sort of go back and forth with it to have just really consistent uptime. I think I'm sort of looking at the game the wrong way, or not the wrong way, but not the way that a lot of people would intend for me to look at it whenever I'm playing Necromancer, because I just think about constant uptime the way that I do in other MMOs, and I've sort of messed with the mechanics a little bit to be able to get that the way that I would in other MMOs, even though it seems like this game isn't really set up to do that. I have so many skills through all of my bars that I can pretty much always be doing some kind of skill and doing some kind of damage. I go Axe and Staff right now with my Necromancer, so I just always have this sort of ebb and flow going on with this character where I'm using as many skills as I can get out before I start to get low on health, and then I pop into Death Shroud, and then I let him heal me, and I let my minions heal me as well, and I just keep this sort of going back and forth. It's really, really fun and really enthralling to be in combat because I'm just always flirting with death and then just bringing it right back. Huge tankiness with the Necromancer.
So entering
Huge
the Death Shroud
survivability.
can save you if you are in a dire situation. A Necromancer can also summon minions to aid them in combat. Minions
He
follow
didn't
the
even talk about the meteor thing for Revenant, did he? For Vindicator? There's supposed to be some meteor or comet attack that everyone uses. He didn't even talk about that. I feel like there's too much to talk about.
Necromancer around, and when summoned, they have a special skill to heal the Necromancer or deal damage to their foes. The Necromancer is a great profession for new Guild Wars 2 players. It has so much survivability with the Death Shroud, and the minions can be used as shields to prevent them from taking damage. Definitely try out this profession if you're new to the game. If you picked up the Heart of Thorns expansion, the Necromancer can unlock the Reaper elite specialization. This elite specialization is great at dealing damage, while it also has great survivability. The Reaper can use a greatsword in combat. The greatsword has great crowd control and damaging abilities. The Reaper Shroud that the Reaper gains access to is similar to the Death Shroud. You still get an extra health bar and you can still fuel the Shroud with life force. However, the Reaper Shroud skills are more focused on dealing AoE damage to your foes. This makes it really useful in open world PvE content. Combine this with the AoE skills from the Greatsword and you're in for a good time. Shouts let your character chant a certain phrase that has immediate effect. These shouts are basically instant cast skills that can buff you or negatively affect your foes. The powerful fire...
These hero points? Do you just earn hero points through XP? When you get to max level? What?
Fire expansion lets the Necromancer unlock the Scourge
What
elite
is going on?
specialization. This elite specialization is great at inflicting damage over time effects to your foes, but Scourges can also support their allies. The Scourge can wield a torch in their offhand. The torch lets the Scourge inflict damage over time effects and gives them access to a powerful crowd control skill. In contrast to other Necromancer elite specializations, the Scourge does not have a shroud. Instead, it uses sand shades. Sand shades are summoned at your preferred location and deal damage to foes, but can also provide barrier to allies. Barrier protects your allies from harm. The sand shades also have skills tied to them, which you can use at the cost of your life force.
So it's Gara?
Moving on to the last elite specialization for the Necromancer, the End of Dragons expansion.
Okay, so here's the thing that I find really interesting about Guild Wars 2. Here's what draws me into video games really, really easily. I like a video game that is cryptic. I like a video game that seems like there's a lot going on underneath the hood, and my brain wants to work on that puzzle to try to figure out what's happening. That's what pulls me into video games exclusively. The reason I like Dark Souls, the reason I like Elden Ring, the reason I like World of Warcraft, all those games is because at some point I felt like I don't know what's going on in this game, but I keep seeing clips of it, and I keep being interested in the clips that I'm seeing. I personally now feel the need to get there and see those things and do those things and learn how to do those things. I want to have that knowledge that they have, and I want to pull it into me. The thing about Guild Wars that really, really gets into my brain and really starts working around in there is that the more that I watch, the less I feel like I know, and also the less I feel like everyone else knows. Not only... It doesn't feel like there's very many masters of this game. People make builds, but it doesn't feel like anything is set in stone as being what the best thing to do is. It feels like everyone's sort of still discovering things about this game, and we're decades into it. World of Warcraft is a game that is kind of solved, and as new content comes out, because of the way the building blocks are put together, new content becomes solved very, very quickly when it comes out in World of Warcraft. Same thing with old school RuneScape. It is an extremely cryptic game. It is very difficult to understand what's going on, but over the years, we have basically solved it. We now know what the skill ceilings sort of feel like they are, and until somebody comes around that paradigm shifts that, we basically know that it's possible to do everything in that game with 1 HP at this point, and you can sort of figure out how to work the mechanics to make that happen. We know how the stats work. We know all of these things. Guild Wars 2 feels like a game where everyone who tries to explain it to me is just doing doing the best job that they can. Even these content creators that have massive amounts of numbers, that make guide videos, that do all these things, it feels there's always this sort of underpinning of, this is what I know about it so far. There's not this underpinning of, if you just listen to me, I'll tell you everything that you're going to need to know in order to play this game, because there's too much going on, and it's too malleable. There's too many differences and nuances in what you can actually put together. And that's not a bad thing. I would say that's a really, really good thing. But it is super overwhelming and fries out my little tiny brain every single time I try to put this stuff together. It is nuts as a person who's put 50 hours into this game now and hasn't hit max level yet on a single character, and is sitting here trying to understand what all of these things actually mean for the gameplay. It is very, very overwhelming, just like everything else in Guild Wars 2. And as I'm starting to play Guild Wars 2 more and more, I was always under the impression that Guild Wars 2 was a more simple, more easy to get into. You never really had to worry too much about the specifics of things, and you could just kind of play it however you want, and you'll be fine no matter what, and all this kind of stuff. And that's why I thought that people were sort of avoiding it as an MMO. As I'm getting further and further into it, I'm starting to think that it's because it's so difficult in the later levels and so complicated that people sort of stay away from it, because the challenge is so much that they would just rather play something like World of Warcraft, where they can just follow a build guide and learn their rotations and do those things, and just they'll be fine in a raid. And all that matters is getting better at doing the mechanics of the bosses and all of these kinds of things, keeping your uptime with your skills, learning which skills are important to use at what points in time, learning your toolkit, doing all those things. In this game, it feels like situationally, from moment to moment, you are going to be doing a different thing depending on what your current toolkit is, what the enemies are doing, who else you're playing with, that it all sort of flows together in this kind of way that it makes it so that you have just unlimited options. And not only do you have unlimited options, you are supposed to be using those unlimited options to really solve the game moment to moment. It's like Elden Ring in that way, where there's so many different ways to approach a challenge, and just your imagination is the limit of what you can actually do. It's not. Sorry for the long-winded rant, but it's wild, dude.
Lets the Necromancer unlock the Harbinger elite specialization. This elite specialization can deal damage at the cost of their own health,
dude.
but can also support allies. A Harbinger can use a pistol in their main hand. The pistol can quickly inflict damage over time effects to foes and has a crowd control ability. The unique profession mechanic for the Harbinger is the Harbinger Shroud. The Harbinger Shroud functions like the other Necromancer Shrouds. However, the Harbinger Shroud gives the Necromancer a number of mobility and damaging skills. But more importantly, while in the Harbinger Shroud, a Harbinger will accumulate Blight over time. Blight is an effect that reduces your maximum health. So, staying in the Harbinger Shroud for a while can make you more vulnerable. However, Blight can also be used to your advantage by selecting specific traits.
Necromancer turns
there are
everything on its
traits
head.
that increase your damage or increase your healing the more Blight you have accumulated. The Harbinger can also use elixirs in combat. When you throw them at your foes, it will damage them and inflict a negative effect. When you stand in the impact area of an elixir, you will gain Blight. Depending on your playstyle, you can stand in the impact area of an elixir to accumulate more Blight, or be safe and just throw them from a distance. Let's head on to the next light armor profession on this list,
Risk and
the
reward.
Elementalist.
This game is all
I've been
risk and
playing this
reward.
profession since the release.
If you want more buffs and more boons, if you want more support, you can go that way for every single class. But if you want to go pure, just balls to the wall damage, that's always an option for you as well. There's an Elementalist spec that I am super interested in learning about, and that's the one where all the weapons, they use all the weapons like Simnus or Byakuya or all that stuff, or Gilgamesh and everything. So I really want to learn about
Release
this.
of Guild Wars 2 in 2012, and it's still one of my favorites. The Elementalist uses the power of the elements to deal damage to foes or heal allies. Elementalists share similarities with mages and shamans from other games. The unique profession mechanics of the Elementalists are the elemental attunements. An Elementalist can attune to different elements that change their weapon skills based on the element. Fire gives you heavy damage and burning abilities. Water slows your foes.
So this is what people mean. You basically have multiple attack styles the same way that you would with different weapons, but you use them through the attunements, and you can switch through different ones. So you have 4 different weapons basically that you're using with an Elementalist. Even though it's all one weapon, you're using different attunements in order to get get there.
Support your allies. Air gives you heavy damage and control abilities,
Avatar.
and Earth gives you damage over time and protection abilities. The Elementalist offers endless possibilities to play. Every element gives you new weapon skills to play around with. The Elementalist, like all other professions or classes, has access to different weapon sets, and each weapon set gives the Elementalist new skills based on their selected attunement, and thus this gives the Elementalist access to 20 skills at the same time. Therefore, it might not be the best pick for newer players, but hey, don't let that stop you. The Elementalist was my first profession, and it's still my main character to this day. The Heart of
So
Thorns
rad,
expansion
dude.
lets the Elementalist unlock the Tempest Elite specialization. This elite specialization deals a good amount of damage, while it can also be used to support your allies. The Tempest is able to use a Warhorn in their offhand. The Warhorn
I
is
feel like if I had $1 for every single time that he said that it could be used, also this could also be used to support your allies. If I had $1 for every single time that he did that, I could afford all the transmutation charges that I want for early levels, and I could buy all of the living world pieces as well. There's so much going on, dude. Every class is everything. I
great
mean,
since it gives
it's
the
so hard to
Tempest more
explain them because
supportive
of
and
that.
crowd control abilities. The unique profession mechanic of the Elementalist is the Overload ability. When you stay
How
in
does it feel? That's the thing that I'm really trying to discern from all of this, and I just have to get my hands on them. This game is the ultimate in my favorite thing about MMORPGs. One of my favorite things about them is that they all have the same control setup. It's all just this keyboard in front of me, and the buttons go 1 through 0, and you use shift in order to switch different keybinds, and you move with A, D, W, S, and you move the camera by right clicking and you would think that would mean that the games all feel the same and all of the characters feel the same. And a lot of times at the very beginning they do. But as you continue to play the game, you start to feel that playing what you're doing with your hands feels like what you're doing inside of the game. So the way that the character plays, the way that they move around, the way that they feel when you're actually holding them with your hands using the keyboard is something that is so unique to an MMORPG and something that's so hard to explain to someone who's never played an MMORPG. The people who have only spent 10, 15 hours in an MMORPG think that what it is you click on an enemy and you press button, and then 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 that enemy's dead, and then you walk to the next enemy, and you click on the enemy, and you press button, and you press button, and you press button. And it's so hard to get across to people of, oh, buddy, that's really cute that's what you think that it is. Your character might feel like Levi from Attack on Titan. Your character might feel like Ichigo from Bleach. Your character might feel like Guts from Berserk. Your character might feel like one of the characters from Fairy Tail. Your character might feel like Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist. Your character might feel like Light Yagami from Death Note. It's so interesting the way that it changes, that they can take such a simple underpinning and build on top of it in this way that creates different games within the game that you're playing, to the point that you start to realize whenever you're in a group of people doing the content with you that everything around you that's happening is so unique to that person. And you end up finding the ones who you really like to play with, because not only is their character capable of doing things, the way they specifically control that character is so unique to them, and everybody who plays an MMO sort of gets their own unique style going after a little while of playing. And that's one of the things that sort of disappoints me about World of Warcraft at this point, is that we've gotten so far with all of these guides and everything that now everyone's just trying to imitate a few top players. But the reason those people are the top players is because they're imaginative with their play style and they have their own sort of thing going on. And that's the cool thing about RuneScape. That's the reason that I like RuneScape so much, is that everybody has their own unique way of playing RuneScape, and the ways and the things that they like doing and the places that they go in order to train certain skills, and the ways that they approach each individual challenge, whether it be melee or magic or range in the fight caves, and the way that they're actually going. It's just such a cool thing, and Guild Wars 2 does it so well that it keeps me thinking about it. The way that my content grind kind of works, it's impossible for me to be playing all of the games all the time, so I sort of have to do these little chunks where I'm watching videos about this one, but I'm streaming that one, and I'm making shorts about this one over here, and I'm looking into this game so that I can see if that's a game that I'm going to play in the future. And Guild Wars 2 keeps popping into my brain constantly as something that I want to do, because there is so much puzzle there, and there's so much personality, and I am enjoying Necromancer, but I don't feel like I'm really expressing myself through Necromancer, and these other specs are calling to me in such a way that I just want to get to them, but I need to finish my Necromancer first. It's so much, dude. It's so much. It's wild. If you don't play Guild Wars 2 and you like video games, period, you need to play Guild Wars 2. Legitimately. I mean that. I'm not just being a fanboy for this game. I didn't think I was going to like Guild Wars 2. I had sort of been put off of it a little bit by certain content creators that I found originally about Guild Wars 2. But dude, it is so good and feels so good for all the reasons that people talk about all the time. The jump quests or the jump puzzles, they're really fun. The world quests are really good. There's lots of people around doing all the things, all this stuff. On a way more personal and selfish kind of level, Guild Wars 2 feels really good to play. The combat feels really interesting and alive. The bosses are really well done. It is just a great game, and you should definitely play it. Sorry to geek out a little bit there, but gee whiz, dude.
An achievement
We're
for a
at
brief
52
period,
minutes.
you are
I have to
able
finish
to
this video
overload
up.
that achievement. This overload ability is a strong AoE skill that takes a few seconds to channel. Overload Fire turns the Tempest into a fiery tornado that damages foes. Overload Water turns you into a bubble that heals allies and cleanses them from negative effects. Overload Air summons a lightning storm that damages foes, and Overload Earth damages foes and gives you protective boons. The Path of Fire expansion lets the Elementalist unlock the Weaver Elite specialization. This elite specialization can deal a great amount of damage. As a Weaver, you can wield a sword in your main hand. The sword gives the Weaver more damage and mobility skills. The profession mechanic of the Weaver is that you can now attune to 2 elements at the same time. For example, if I tap into Fire attunement and then into Air attunement, you get a new weapon skill. Your weapon skill bar will now have 2 fire skills, 2 air skills, and a new skill in the middle that has attributes of both elements. This new skill is called a dual attack. This elite specialization adds even more skills to the Elementalist, and it is therefore hard to master. However, the damage output can be insane, and therefore it can be really satisfying to play the Weaver if you play it right. But keep in mind, it does have a high skill level. Moving on to the last elite specialization for the Elementalist. The End of Dragons expansion lets the Elementalist unlock the Catalyst elite specialization. The Catalyst can use a hammer in combat. The hammer allows for a more melee focused approach to the Elementalist. The profession mechanic of the Catalyst is the Jade Sphere. You can summon a Jade Sphere to create a combo field and use it to grant boons to your allies. The effect of this Jade Sphere is based on the Catalyst's current attunement. This can be helpful when you are playing with other people. Other players can use skills in your combo field and benefit from it. If you want to know more about combo fields, you might want to check out my combat video.
Dude, he didn't even go into that much detail.
Light armor profession in Guild Wars 2, the Mesmer. If you made it this far, you might as well leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate it. The Mesmer uses manipulations, clones, phantasms, and deceptions to deal damage and deceive their foes. The unique profession mechanics of the Mesmer are phantasms, clones, and shatter skills. Phantasms and clones are summoned by using your skills. Phantasms are transparent and deal a high amount of damage. You can easily distinguish them from the Mesmer itself. Clones, however, are exact copies and are hard to distinguish from the Mesmer. Use phantasms to deal damage to your foes, and use clones to deceive them.
PvP.
After you have summoned a few clones with your skills, you are able to...
PvP is going to go off in this game, dude. The more that I look at this game in general, the less... So I'm usually a PvM or PvE person in video games. That's the way that I've historically gone into a video game and wanted to play it. Guild Wars 2 might be the first game that I've looked at that has the option between the two of them, and it's pulled me into PvP as being the end game for it. And I can't explain 100% why that is, but I think that it might have something to do with the customizability of your character and how it sort of doesn't feel like, oh, I'm going up against a guy who does this thing. It feels more like, oh, I'm going up against these people who know what they're doing, and I need to learn what it is that they're doing and actually be able to combat them in some kind of way. And things like this, the clones, things like that are really cool because it allows this sort of different element in PvP that other games wouldn't have.
Shatter them on your foes. You have a number of different shatter skills, and each of them has a different effect. The intensity of these skills are increased the more clones you have. Your first shatter skill always damages your foes. The second shatter skill confuses your foes. The third shatter skill stuns or dazes them, and the fourth skill makes you invulnerable for a brief period. The Mesmer has an extensive amount of skills to deceive, evade and move around with. This makes the Mesmer incredibly fun, but somewhat hard to play. However, in contrast to the Elementalist, the Mesmer does not have that many skills, so it might be a bit harder to get into as a new Guild Wars 2 player, but you'll get the hang of it eventually. If you picked up the Heart of Thorns expansion, a Mesmer can unlock the Necromancer elite specialization. The Necromancer uses time and space to deal damage and support allies. The Necromancer can use a shield in combat.
Everything does damage and supports allies, dude. Is there tanking in this game? Do people tank bosses in this game?
The unique profession mechanic of the Necromancer is its ability to create a rift in space and time. Your shatter skills remain mostly the same. However, your fourth skill has been replaced by Continuum Split. Continuum Split destroys all of your clones and creates a new timeline. In this brief moment, you are able to use your skills as you normally would. However, when the Continuum Split effect expires, you return to your previous location, health, endurance, and skill recharges. When you use Continuum Split, it's smart to use skills that have a long cooldown. Yeah. So when the effect expires,
and take as much damage
as
you want to.
Also, the Necromancer can use wells that reduce the recharge of your and your allies' skills. And these wells also increase their spell casting and attack speed. A true master of time.
Support means such a different thing in this game. There are so many different ways to support your allies. It can be through allowing them to do more damage by decreasing the amount of time that they're spending, in their cooldowns. It can be by increasing their attack. It can be by increasing their defense. It can be by healing them. It can be by giving them, more speed on the battlefield. It can be by allowing them to use more skills in frequency. It's so nuts.
If I'd say so. Once you have the Path of Fire expansion, the Mesmer can unlock the Mirage. The Mirage allows for a more deceptive and ambush style of play. As a Mirage, you can wield an axe in combat. The axe skills inflict damage over time effects to your target, but are also used to deceive your target. The unique mechanic of the Mirage is the Mirage Cloak. When a Mesmer uses the Mirage trait line, it loses the ability to dodge. Instead, you will gain a Mirage Cloak when you dodge. You won't move away from your target as dodging normally would, but instead you gain a brief window where the Mirage evades attacks and gains an ambush skill. This is a special skill only the Mirage can use when they use their Mirage Cloak. So a Mirage can evade attacks without moving away from their target. Luckily, the Mirage also gains a number of other utility skills that lets them teleport a short distance. Moving on to the last elite specialization of this video.
Thank goodness, dude, my brain is fried.
When you own the End of Dragons expansion, a Mesmer can unlock the Virtuoso. The Virtuoso is able to deal a lot of damage.
No, sorry,
quickly.
this is the one that it wasn't even the Elementalist, it was this class that I'm interested in playing. Oh my gosh, it's the Mesmer. Bro, I'm so stupid, dude. There's too much. There's too much. How can I be smart about this? There's too much to do.
And also use
really
a dagger in their main hand. This is not a melee weapon, however. The Virtuoso uses the dagger to send blades out to your foes at range. The profession mechanic of the Virtuoso is that it drops the ability to create clones. Instead, the Virtuoso summons blades when they're using their skills.
See, this is what's interesting to me, is this is kind of a class that I would want to take a boost on, because when you get to elite specializations, this is the thing that I would want to do, and it doesn't even play like the Mesmer anyways. I know that it probably has some of the same kind of core mechanics of it, but why would I go through 80 levels of playing a character that's not going to be what I want to play at the end anyways? I don't care about the Mesmer as far as a class goes, but this elite specialization is so cool that it makes me want to play a Mesmer just to be able to get this.
For attacking. Even outside of combat, the Virtuoso can generate blades. These blades float above the Virtuoso and they can fire them at their foes. The Virtuoso's shatter skills have also changed, but their effect remains somewhat the same.
Cool.
The first skill still inflicts damage. The second one still inflicts
This is a thing that I think that MMOs are really missing out on nowadays that used to always get me into them. The way that something looks will draw me into it a lot more. The aesthetic of a class, the way their skills activate, the way that you fight enemies, all those kinds of things. When I was a kid playing games like MapleStory, I picked my class solely off of what I wanted them to look like.
negative effects. The third one still stuns.
I played an Ice and Lightning and Mabel story and named him Haku because I loved Naruto.
And the last one still protects. A big advantage of the blades over clones is that the blades remain after combat. Clones disappear when you defeat an enemy. You have to resummon them when you enter combat. Blades, however, stay, and you can use them when you re-enter combat. And that's all the professions and all their elite specializations in Guild Wars 2. This video took a long time to create, so I'd appreciate it if...
Alright guys, holy cow. That video was insane, and this video is going to be super long because of it. Give his video a like if you haven't already. Subscribe to Kyosika if you haven't already. This video was absolutely nuts. I feel like I have more questions than I have answers still. I'll be playing this game again on Tuesday on stream. Come by and tell me what I'm doing wrong, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Be safe out there. Bye.